My Outlook let me know that it's time to start. Right, well, yeah, we'll make a start. People are still joining, but hi everyone. Welcome to another edition of our BI and Data webinar sessions brought to you by Robert Walters. Today, we're joined by Sam Wilson, Solutions Architecture Director over at Bruntwood. He's going to be speaking about how to implement AI into your organisation. Now, before I hand over to Sam, can you just next slide, Sam, just a bit of info about myself. So my name is Chris Ingman, for those of you who don't know me already. I'm a senior recruitment consultant at Robert Walters, specialising in business intelligence, data and analytics. It's worth noting at the moment, so I was just saying to Sam earlier, but I'm probably busier than I have been for the last 3 months at the moment. We've got a lot of live roles coming, a lot of companies starting to hire again. So if you just have the next slide again, Sam. So here's a list of basically the live roles that are going on at the minute. Obviously, we're getting more and more as time progresses. So if you found yourself in a position where you're actively looking for work, maybe redundancy or the risk of redundancy, or just looking for something new, feel free to get in touch. My details are at the bottom of this slide. Feel free to give me a call or email. Also, on another hand, if you're a hiring manager looking to expand your team, as I know a lot of companies are starting to do again, feel free to get in touch. I can give you a bit of information about the market, what it looks like, and we can go from there. But otherwise, I've just the next slide, Sam. That's all from me. So I'll be looking after the chat box throughout. So if you have any questions, just feel free to post there. We'll be doing a 15-minute Q&A session at the end, give or take. So feel free to ask any questions then. Also, you can just all do me a favour and keep your mics and the video off. It just makes things run a bit smoother. But otherwise, that's all from me. So over to you, Sam.
Okay, thank you very much. So, as Chris said, my name's Sam Wilson. I am Director of Solutions Architecture at Bruntwood. So my remit includes anything IT related whatsoever currently. Just a very quick intro about Bruntwood and what we're trying to do. So we're a 42-year-old property company, and we buy buildings across the Northwest and let them out to companies to use as office space, lab space, or even retail. We've been growing steadily for a long time now. It's a strange time to be in commercial property because the world is changing quite quickly, but it's an interesting time as well. I'm going to start off by talking to you about our lovely data. It's one of my things I get quite passionate about, and people are dismayed or disappointed to find out you can be passionate about data. But it's really useful for us to actually be able to interpret and use data well. But we've not always had that ease of good data. So as a business, in 2014, we decided that the only way we were going to drive ownership and usage of our systems was to let different parts of the business specify how those systems worked, and to actually try and design them themselves. So, for instance, we gave our sales team a complete license to design their own implementation of Salesforce to do it how they wanted to do it. We gave the lease transactions team, our legal team, full control over how their bit worked. And what happened was those teams didn't work together, and they all put on every last piece of information they could possibly want on the system somewhere, and said the other people would fill it in for them. And so we ended up building in 2014 an absolute giant system that nobody really used very well because it was just too complicated. So in order to actually get a lease onto our system, there was about 2,500 pieces of information that had to be filled in, and the result of that was that no one bothered doing anything on the system until the lease was negotiated offline and then actually added at the end. So we had really, really poor data. And what that poor data means is that all the reporting that we were trying to do was taken offline because the live data wasn't accurate enough. People invented their own processes off system to support those offline reports to fill in the gaps. Those processes clashed with the actual proper systemized processes people were supposed to be following, leading to even more bad data, and then you're back in that vicious circle again. So our data was getting progressively worse and worse and worse as we went on. And it came to a head eventually when we were trying to do a remortgage effectively on some of our properties, and we found out there was some material holes in our data that we just weren't aware of that was making us look really quite bad in front of the banks. So I formed a big company-wide project to streamline our systems. So I aim to replace our CRM, our finance system, our marketing systems, our lease systems, all with one huge system, which should work end to end. The approach we took was to take the business processes first of all and simplify them, make them really easy, make them dead simple to use. And once we got them simple, then we put them on a system. We created a central sort of spine in the system, a product book, and that was used to control not just the actual data structure of what we built, but also how the workflows worked, what was triggered from a central data structure. And that was quite cutting edge for a property company. We also made it a principle that we weren't going to have lots of integrated systems and data passing back and forth. We had a hub and spoke model where we had a central core system, and we only ever had that hub integrating with those various spokes, which means you don't get that spaghetti mess of different systems all talking to each other. And finally, we banned offline reporting. So everything the company does now only uses live data. So it was a huge program. It took us the best part of 2 years to go through. What we had in the end was lovely, crystal clean data that we could use for our reports and to run the business with. And that is the first part of what I was going to talk about. So to implement AI in your business, really, you've got to have that correct data structure. You can't build anything AI related off poor data. It has to be accurate and it has to be complete. But the question is, what else can you do with that data? So we had good data. The challenge for the business to me was, what can we do now? How do we turn that data into different sorts of insight? What can we do with it really? And the first thought we had was, what if we take the data that we've got that's accurate and try and combine it with data that's available publicly? So for our customers, that means we would try and combine it with information from Companies House, information from Mint and Bowhurst and the credit collection agencies, but also with things like companies' own social media feeds about what they're doing, if they're hiring, if they've had recent sources of funding. We tried to build up this really rich customer picture. The business gave me a steer to try and pick out some fairly easy priorities here. So how can we use that rich data to actually optimize our letting processes? Can we work out from people that aren't customers currently how we should target them and which one we should function on? And the final thing was, if we were to buy a new building from scratch, what's the best way to actually split that building into office space, into shower rooms and co-working lounges? What retail works best in it? How can we work out the perfect way of breaking up a building? It's a lot of data there, and no real way of structuring it. And I started talking about AI as a way to try and approach some of this insight generation. A lot of people expect businesses to be resistant to the idea of AI. I found that wasn't actually the case at all. I found that our board, if anything, were a little bit over-optimistic about what was possible with AI. They sort of thought that once you turned on the AI switch, that the insights generate themselves and pop out and fall into your lap, and you can solve any problem you can conceive of. So they thought once we switched on the AI, we were going to see our profits spiral. So obviously, I had to get them to a point where they understood if you invest a certain amount of time and a certain amount of money, what's the likely return and how's that going to work for us? So managing expectations, as well as getting the people who are reluctant or uncertain to actually buy into what we're trying to do. And this is my approach. And don't forget, this relies on having good data. So the first thing to do is to make sure that you start small. So AI, as we go down our AI path, eventually it'll be all through our business. It'll be permeating all the different decision systems that we have, all the different parts of the company. But on day one, I wanted to find a small project, something I could tweak, something that would make a small difference. I wanted to have a definite objective, so I wanted to actually say at the start of the project, this is what I'm going to achieve, and it's a pass-fail scenario. There's no spin possible on it. It had to be something doable, so I had to be fairly confident that there was an opportunity that I'd be able to hit, and pick something non-controversial. So one of the biggest problems that we had was getting people to accept that the AI was there to help them and to support them, not to replace them. So for instance, if I started off with a project to replace the sales team with an AI, they wouldn't have got that initial buy-in. And the last one, the most important one, was to find a way to measure the ROI for it. It can be quite hard to measure that return. So this is how I pitched it to the business. So I've changed the numbers here because they're quite sensitive. But what I did was I targeted our vacancy costs. So we've got around about 7 million square foot of space across the Northwest. Currently, there's about 1 million square foot that is vacant, either because we've just finished building buildings or people have moved out as a churn. But there's 1 million square foot there. And what happens is, to get someone to take some of that space takes us about 6 months from the first inquiry about the space to go through the legal process to actually moving in. And while they're doing that, so while they're waiting to move in, we pay rates and utilities on that space, and it costs us about £10 a square foot. But on the flip side, once it's let, it brings in, on average, about £15 a square foot. So there's a £25 a square foot swing on 1 million square foot. So it's £25 million a year of vacancy costs. And that 6 month process means that our vacancy costs effectively are about £12.5 million a year. So my case, the business was, if I can shave that down by 1%, which isn't massive, it's £125,000 a year saving. So 1% is achievable. It's definitely doable, and it's got a definite ROI. So we're measuring this based on that lettings date from first inquiry to later on. So I engaged a company called Peak AI, who are based in Manchester, and we partnered with them. And we started to explore the data and look into what we could find with it. So we had all of our data, all that third-party data, and they have their own database of customers as well. And we started trying to look for patterns and what we can do. And I won't go through all the various factors feeding our models, but just some things that show you how we worked it out. So we looked at our customer path and how many times they view spaces before they move in to the building or before it goes ahead. And what this shows us is that when someone has a first viewing, they move in with a certain probability. On the second viewing, that probability goes up quite a bit. On the third viewing, it goes up quite a bit more, but after that, it starts to tail away. So that makes intuitive sense to us. It basically says that if you've got someone who's interested in moving to a space, then a third viewing means that they're really checking it out going further. But beyond that, they start to kick tires, and maybe they're stagnant, they're not making any progress, or it's going to fall away. So our model says, okay, well, we'll use this profile here of viewings, feed that into the system. We looked at also how the company age makes a difference to the likelihood of a deal going ahead, for instance. And we found that we do very well with sort of companies just past the startup phase. So this spike on the left there is where you've got 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, up to 5-year-old companies. We land a lot of those. Then we do quite badly once they get past that sort of 5-year-old stage, back up until they get to around 50 years old. So we're doing very well here on the scale-ups and on the SMEs, but we've got a gap with people who are growing quite quickly, and we're not getting many startups coming through. So we put these charts into a couple of different models, and we looked at, as a lead comes in, can we create buckets which show how likely those leads are to go ahead based on a variety of these factors here. And that's where it came out on day one. So we created these pots. We could see how our completions were working. We did a list of all the features that we were feeding into this model. So there's all sorts there. What we found was, though, that some of these features were actually false sort of indicators. So the biggest one there, or whether someone's going to move in or not, is that company check equals false flag. What that means is that we have one particular product where you have to do a check with HMRC to make sure that they're not money laundering for virtual offices. It's the only product we have it on. But on that one, if that company check fails, the customer never moves in. And so the model picked it out saying, aha, that's a definite indicator, whereas in fact, that's a consequence of the process that we were putting them through. So we did a regular review of all these features and ruled out the ones that were not actually feeding into the model, and kept going through that process, saying what's important, what's not working. And in the meantime, we started to put those features into a very big neural network and say, these are all the assets, these are all the piece of information that we're putting in. How does that then start to change our model? So there's a whole load of things that we've fed into here. What we've done is we've made 5 real models off that neural network. So the first one is around lead scoring. So that says if someone first inquires about space with us, what's the probability they're going to go ahead? The second one is opportunity scoring. So this is after we've got rid of all the tire kickers and people who are not really interested, all the ones that we've got which are genuine sales chances. What's the actual completion chance of them? And that score changes as we go through the process. So as people start to cool down or start to get more excited about the prospect of moving in, that score changes. We've got churn risk, which is how likely they are to leave once they've moved in. So if they've been in for a year, are they going to stay? Are they going to go? We've got a lifetime value figure. So we try and work out what the expected revenue is from a customer over the course of their contract with us. Because it can be anything from like a 5-year contract initially, it might turn into a 30-year relationship. So we're predicting that on there. And also upsell opportunities. We're trying to work out which customers we've got chances to sell more products to. So those are the 5 models we've built initially. And they all work in a similar sort of way, which is on this basis. So if you look at that first top left graph there, this is how things started off. So we divided all of those opportunities into 5 equal sized buckets. So each one's got 20% of the share of opportunities in it. And because it's completely at random, there's no more likelihood that the ones in bucket 5 will complete than the ones in bucket 1. So 5 equal sized buckets, all with the same chance of going through. What we're aiming for is on the model on the bottom right, which is where you've got 5 equal sized buckets, but the ones that get put in bucket 5, the model's worked out, are the ones that really like to go ahead. So that's where we should focus our energies and our efforts. The first pass, which is the input of all those various factors in that neural network, looked a little bit like the model on the top right. So buckets 1 and buckets 5 are really small. The model wasn't confident to put anything definitely into go ahead or definitely not going ahead. But it got the overall shape of the line about right. So it was going to tell you which ones would like to go ahead, but it just weighted it too heavily around the uncertainty in the middle. Where we are currently is that one with the red box around it. So our buckets are nearly about the same size now, and the model has got a slight dip around the middle 2 buckets. But broadly speaking, we can now tell pretty accurately from all the leads that come into us which ones are going to go ahead and which ones are not worth bothering with. But what we've done is we've changed our sales process now. So we're targeting those 4s and 5s first, and we're not putting much effort into the ones that are lower down. And what we're doing is we're tracking how that's impacting on the sales process. So it's reduced the sales cycle by about 3%. So we were aiming for 1%, we've actually got 3%, which is just short of £400,000 a year saving just from that intervention alone, and that's off of one model. So that's my business case made there. And then what we're also noticing is that we're actually better able to negotiate concessions. So there's a standard industry approach here, which is as someone moves into an office which is £20 a square foot, they'll typically get a rent-free period at the start of that. We found that we're better able to tell which customers want the space definitely and offer lower concessions or better concessions. So we're not having to give away as much free space to bring people in because we know which one's going to go ahead. Worth saying that this model worked up until about 4 months ago when COVID started. Currently, not much is selling at all. So the sales process is getting progressively longer as we go through COVID. So what I had then was I had my accurate data. I had some real improvements around what we've done. So opportunities were identified, but the business was bought into that and wanted more. So case proved the initial one, it was what's next. And what we're doing in this period is we're building up. So we're starting off by saying, we've got data, we've used it to find some improvements and refinements, but are there any actually big opportunities, ways to change the way we do business dramatically that we can take advantage of here? So refine my approach slightly. So having started small, I'm now going to try something a little bit bigger. Having had a definite objective, I'm now going to loosen that a little bit and look for a direction of travel, if not an absolute hard and fast objective. I'm still going to pick something doable, and I'm still not going to try and replace those sales guys yet. The ROI, though, I've got a little bit more wiggle room now, having proved that we're already making a lot of savings or more income based on what we've done. This time I can make a saving on efficiency or time saved rather than necessarily a bottom line business case for it. And this is a live capture from our system. I've pixelated the actual names because they're confidential, but this is a customer here who's looking for quite a small office in central Manchester. And you can see there's a section here called peak integration. So that says this one has been given a lead score opportunity score of 4. So it's not quite in the top bucket for going ahead, but it's predicted to go ahead. It's made an estimate of how much they're going to pay in revenue, between £6,000 and £25,000. And as it happens, it's a 6-year deal worth £59,000. It's coming around £10,000. So we've got the right revenue there for it. We've got the right opportunities. And our sales team are more confident in the model. They say it's 95% chance of going ahead. But what we've got on here, is all these activities here. So we're logging all the phone calls, all the emails, all the viewings, all the discussions back and forth, all the negotiation. We're looking at what products are taking on top of this. And there must be something we can do in that data that's hidden in there that we can actually use to help. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to go now for a process of guided selling. And so we're using a sequence model on a recurrent neural network to say what activities that the sales team and other people do can we either automate to make them faster. So if we know that there's a certain pattern of email communications that are working, some that aren't working, can we actually use that to automate that process and shorten it by a few days? Equally, can we tell what the indicators are when the deal's starting to go wrong or starting to get stuck? And can we do something different to unstick it? So if there's evidence that a particular salesperson is sending emails weekly but not getting responses, or responses slowing down, can we change our approach slightly? Can we switch to a different offer or a different medium, or can we then re-engage them in a different way? So we're in the process of building this model now, and it'll be a same approach now. So rather than trying to necessarily just increase the speed of the deal, we're looking at if we can improve the conversion rates. So can we actually rescue deals that started to go wrong more? So what we're going to do is, having made that change to guided selling, so we've actually got the salespeople to start using the model to help them guided sell. We're going to put that change in place on the system. If it looks like there's fields that we're not capturing, or information that we should be capturing that we're not, we're going to start making system changes and actually putting them into play as processes. And what that's going to do, that's going to give us a lovely feedback loop and actually start capturing more data. So the data is giving us ways to find improvements and opportunities to change what we're doing. When we enact those changes on the system, we then get more data that helps us build the model up. So in 2014, we had that negative feedback loop where our bad data was causing us to go offline and started to mistrust systems and build workarounds. And then that led to more bad data. We've now reversed it. So we've got good data, we've got good reports, we've also got AI insights, and that's giving us more and more good data. So we're on an upward trend currently with this. That's work in progress. We're looking like we're going to make another big return on our investment there. But the success we've had with AI on those ones mean that we're being asked to look at where else we can put AI into business. So other things that we can do that are perhaps less commercial or more diverting, or just more thought leadership to try and use AI elsewhere. I mean, we've got a few things that we're working on. So there's a big sort of groundswell behind AI currently, where it's getting more and more well used in the market. There's a lot of companies now, a lot of products out there that you can start to just almost drop in wholesale without having to have a full data science background. One of the things we're doing is we're trialing a AI telephony system, which is VoiceIQ. So what this does is this sits on top of our Salesforce ecosystem, and it's a standard VoIP product, but with extra bits on it as well. So the first thing it does, it does live transcription of the conversation and feeds that back into our CRM. So when we're speaking to our customers, we've actually got a record of what we said, exactly what we said. We've put this in for our credit control team. So this is the people who are chasing customer debts or chasing invoices, who are traditionally one of the pricklier teams and less likely to join in to fancy things like AI in case it tells them what they should be doing. It flags up things like these opportunities. So initially, those people tick a box or click a bookmark when, for instance, there's an opportunity to sell something or a complaint. What the system is doing is it's learning to recognize the words or the tone that triggers those complaints and start to pick them up for us. So the idea is that as that conversation is taking place in real time, the product is actually picking out, you've got an opportunity here to sell more space, or you've got a complaint here that you need to handle. So it's creating the queue for us automatically to actually raise a case for our complaints team to pick it up. It also tracks GDPR consent. So if we ask someone on the phone if we're okay to use their data, for instance, when they say yes, they sort of bookmark the fact that they said yes, save the snippet of the conversation, say, yeah, that's when you got consent from the customer here. So we know we've got GDPR consent. It does things like sentiment analysis as well. So it can take a conversation with our credit control team and work out which people in that team are upsetting customers the most. It does real-time coaching as well. So it actually makes recommendations of what to sell, what to try differently if the conversation is not going as expected. So we're in trial stage there, but this is going pretty well. It's a lot better than the standard relying on people to take the phone call manually on a mobile phone or a desk phone and then create the CRM records themselves. We've partnered up with Manchester Business School. So I've got 2 students working on a couple of projects here that we just started. The first one is around CV blinding. Commercial property generally has quite poor diversity. If you look at who's working in commercial property in Manchester, it's mostly straight white men. One of the things that Bruntwood are trying to do is to increase diversity in the sector. And the idea we've had here is that if we can take all the CVs that are sent into us and remove identifying information like gender, ethnicity, background, age, we can be left with a CV which is able to be assessed neutrally, and we do our shortlisting of blind CVs rather than off anything which might have subconscious bias in it. We started off trying to work out by removing information that was identifying, but I think what we're going to have to do instead is to actually rebuild a CV upwards from scratch based on what's in there rather than redact it. We're also working on explainability with those partners. So the model is now working well for our existing Salesforce model, but what it doesn't do is explain to our sales team why, for instance, a inquiry that they've had that the salesperson thinks is definitely going to go ahead, the model thinks won't, or vice versa. So why one the salesperson thinks is a waste of time is actually worth investing time in, because it's a model over so many different factors and it's all quite obscured. If we don't manage to find a way of explaining to salespeople that there is a reason behind what it said, then it will disengage from the salespeople. They'll stop trusting the model and they'll look for alternatives. Whereas if we can say to the salesperson, this particular inquiry was given a high score because of X, Y, or Z, even if it's not a full explanation, but these are the factors that were in there, it helps us get buy-in from the sales team and helps keep the model current, and also helps us spot where we've got the model picking up false positives. So as things change and the model's constantly evolving, if we start to introduce something which is skewing the model, this being highlighted should give us a chance to actually pick it out and rectify it at the source. We've not started this one yet. This one is starting soon, but this is one of our buildings that we've got, which is in Manchester. And this building is new and smart. So all throughout here, we're going to have various sensors monitoring air quality, noise, footfall, and different bits and pieces. And what we're going to do is we're going to start overlaying some of the information on little node points here so you can see what's happening in the building. What we'd love to do is to be able to say that based on the sensor data coming through here and the footfall data, or the way people are using buildings, can we use AI to actually start making this more interactive so that we can tell to people here, based on what you're doing, there's currently a quiet room downstairs that you previously liked, that you'd like to work in. Can we start to actually adapt the temperature and the air quality to best optimize this space here somewhere? What can we do with this data? So there's a whole load of things that we want to actually try and put in terms of building usage and control. And again, we're not looking for changing the world here. We're looking for ways to make things 1% or 2% more efficient. So we're looking for constant small savings. And that's back to, that's what we're trying to do again. So it's a real whistle-stop store, but my approach to getting AI implemented was the first one, which is the biggest one, and I put it at 0 because my background is techie, is to get the data right. So you've got to make absolutely sure that the data that you're going to use is accurate and complete. There's a whole load of different papers and studies around bias in AI. And if your data is being produced by a biased process, then the AI is just going to reinforce that and double down on it. So get the data right, first of all. Then you've got to start small. You've got to pick something which is not going to change the world, but is manageable and can be contained. It's got to have that definite objective. It has to be something that you can say, my project has worked or my project has failed for the following reasons. It's got to be doable. So there's no point trying to pick something which is definitely measurable, but is impossible to do with your data or with the time that you've got. It has to be something non-controversial. So if the business is wary around how AI works or don't understand what AI is, you can't be upsetting the people that you need to engage with it. So it has to be non-controversial. You need, at least initially, to have a definite ROI. So you need to have a target of what you're trying to do, but you need to make sure that you can actually measure the impact of your interventions. And then once you've got that rolling, then you can start to layer up what you're doing with data. You can start to layer up more components, more modules, more reach, and you can ease off on having definite hard return on investment metrics. You can ease off on having definite direction of travel, all these things, and get a bit wider and a bit vaguer. We've been on the AI journey now for about 18 months, and where we're at with our board is they now accept that wherever we have data or accurate data, it will be worthwhile investing in putting some AI on top of it, trying to find those small improvements everywhere we can get to. So I think it's safe to say that the board here are bought in and it's working. And so that is how I've implemented AI. That was my last slide. So I'm going to throw it back to Chris now to curate any questions that have come through, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Yeah, thanks, Sam, for that. That was really good. I mean, we've had a few questions already, actually, from a few. So let's just get the next one up. Obviously, if anyone has any more questions, feel free to post in the chat box. So this question was actually it's going back to the start, to be fair. So apologies if it's already been answered. But Hamad Sumro, he asks, do you think policymakers are interested in using data to refine and target policies for a targeted effect?
So yes, they are, but I think they need to see it in action first. So the mirror that we've got is our AI now shaping our business strategy? And the answer is yes, it's starting to. And the business is now actively coming to me to look for opportunities and insights around strategic things. But they were not there on day one, not by a long shot. I had to build that trust first. The AI was going to add some value and actually put some some content in was worth having. So if you get it right, then yes, it will be able to influence policy, and people will use it to influence policy. But you can't start with that.
Great, thanks. Next question is from Scott Marsh. He asks, what technology have you used for the modelling and AI work?
So we have a partnership with Peak, who are a company. So we have a variety of different models that they've built for us. So I'll put a caveat in here and say that I'm not a data scientist. I'm not technical. I understand quite a lot. Certainly now that I've been working with it for a while, but not all the full details. So our lead opportunity scores are, and I'll probably get email from the people at Peak who are listening to this later on, tell me I've got this badly wrong, but they are a form of propensity modelling with some overlay of the neural network on top of it to make some of those decisions for it. I don't know much more detail beyond that without getting drastically too technical or potentially losing the audience, but that's the one for Peak. In the sentiment analysis that we have factored into the sequence modelling, so we can tell when the tone of emails is changing. It's a fairly generic NLP processor, so it's nothing outrageous. And the AI telephony is a third-party product, VoiceIQ. Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. Just another one on PKI here. It's come from Liam Bell. He asks, he mentioned you mentioned you used an external company to PKI. He asked, did they give you any insight into how the predictive model worked? So Liam goes on to say, I know you mentioned the data inputs, but was the predictive model a black box solution, or did they go into detail with the algorithms they used?
They've got into some detail. I haven't pushed for great detail, so we get a lot. When we were building the models and refining it, we went through a lot of the actual inputs altogether. They do own the final model, so we haven't owned it yet. So we couldn't walk away from that currently. We'd have to rebuild some elements of it. So to that extent, it is a bit of a black box.
Thanks. Next question is from Chris, not me. They asked, can you tell us which central core system you implemented? He also goes on to say he understands if you might not be able to.
It's a similar question to the last one. So
yeah.
The core system we're using is through Peak. We didn't try and build it ourselves. So for us to have hired data scientists and invested in the platform ourselves would have been prohibitively expensive upfront when we didn't have that proof of concept or that business buy-in for it. So if I'd had to employ 2 top-end data scientists and then get them to understand Orbit's models and then start to build it, I think the business would have walked away from it. But by doing it through a subscription service, at least initially, we've got that buy-in because there was a much more acceptable approach to the investment of it. As things change and data gets wider, I could probably now make a business case to actually invest in it directly. But initially, I did it as a service.
Thanks, Sam. Another question from Chris. He asks, how would you ensure data assurance on the predictive model?
In terms of how accurate is the source data, or in terms of the veracity of the model's predictions? I suppose that's probably one Chris will have to answer himself.
Yeah, there's no mention of it, sorry.
So the data that we're basing the models on is our data that's used elsewhere in the business for much more of the manual reporting that we've always done. So the day-to-day reports that are used for people actually doing their job, so the management reports that we have, and for the business KPIs. So the data accuracy is fairly well controlled from that point of view. So we have people whose job is actually to make sure the processes are followed, the data is all right. Because we don't use any non-live data for our internal reporting, if there's anything missing or incorrect, we usually have a fairly rapid escalation of someone complaining that their deal isn't on the system. In terms of how we make sure that the model's predictions are correct and staying correct, what we did was, when we first put the models in, we didn't put everything through as with one live score. So we held some stuff back. So we only put scores on some of the opportunities, and we did a sort of side-by-side comparison, almost like a blind test. So we had some scores which were valid, some which were fake, some which were blank, to look at if that was changing the way that salespeople were using the systems, for instance. So we managed to remove the bias through a double blind test effectively. Ongoing, what we're doing is the model is constantly adapting. So as and when different factors that work in the model currently start to become more important or less important, we have a regular review meeting that looks at the models, and we either remove factors altogether, or the model adapts itself and they stay up to date. And then the final piece to check it is that explainability project we're working on with the business school, which is picking out what is the key factor in the model having made this decision, so that when we have got predictions which are unexpected or uncertain, we've got an angle to approach why that might be.
Thanks, Sam. Another question hot off the presses. This is from Johanna. It's a bit of a long one, so bear with me. But they mentioned with the current situation, I assume that your pool of potential customers have significantly reduced, at least temporarily. Thus, the market would get very competitive. Do you think with this AI solution it would provide the capability to stand out, or would another solution or action be required?
So the AI solution that we have isn't currently being used to make us have a greater market share or to try and attract different customers. It's being used so that the customers we do get, we can pick which ones want to go ahead and progress them more quickly. So it's not actually relating directly to what we're doing on the market. What we have seen on the market is that rather than stopping altogether, there's been a sort of shift in what spaces people are looking towards. So flexibility and amenity have become a lot more popular suddenly. So the market picked up quite quickly in the last month or so. So viewings are now returning. What we will ideally need to use AI for is to keep track of, as customers are leaving us, if we can manage to retain them into a more flexible or smaller product, to actually work out where we should position ourselves. So for instance, if we've got 3,000 customers currently, before COVID, there was a churn rate of about 15%. So when it had an expiry or a chance to leave, about 15% took it. If that changes, or if we manage to retain those customers by offering a different, smaller space or a more flexible space, that's what we'd hope the AI was going to then pick up and start to update our predictions on the lifetime value of the customers that we have got, or the customers that were coming through the pipeline. So we know we need to offer this customer a smaller space, and they're worth potentially less to us over the course of the contract.
Thanks, Sam. I think that's everything. So I think we'll leave it there. Obviously, any more questions, feel free. I'll just get them over to you, Sam. You can maybe answer it another time. If we just off the next slide. So thanks everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. I know it's been a bit of it's been a few weeks since the last one. I'm going to start spacing these out over the next probably 2 weeks in between. Just because I know people are getting a bit busier now, so that's the reason why. But our next event would be with Paul Evans. He's operational leader, senior change manager. He'll be speaking about embedding data into the business culture. So that's going to be on Thursday, the 16th of July at 12:30. Now just the next slide, Sam, just to finish. So obviously, as I mentioned before, my name's Chris at Robert Walters. If you're in need of, if you want to find out a bit more about the market, looking for a role, or alternatively looking to hire in your team, feel free to get in touch. I'm more than happy to give some info. Also, if there's any topics in which you're interested in being covered during these sessions, or alternatively, if you want to host a talk, feel free to get in touch. I'm more than happy to help. But otherwise, I'd just like to say thanks to Sam for joining us today, and thanks for everyone for joining. And I'll see you soon.